A new report published recently by CyberCube looks at the impact of the Russian invasion in Ukraine and what this means for the cyber threat landscape. I'm Yvette Essen, Head of Content and Communications for CyberCube, and joining me to talk about the report is William Altman. He is Principal Cybersecurity Consultant for CyberCube. William, let's talk about some of the highlights of this report. War in Ukraine creates fundamental shift in the cyber threat landscape. First of all, can you tell me what activity have we seen to date following Russia's invasion into Ukraine?
Absolutely. Thanks for speaking with me today, Yvette. This situation is being closely tracked by CyberCube and by our concierge threat intelligence team today. We've really been tracking the situation from as far back as early January, when certain experts were calling the shots and saying, hey, there's going to be an invasion. From there, we anticipated a certain level of cyber activity to take place. Now, to date, that level of activity hasn't exactly matched our expectations. We've seen limited use of cyber in this conflict today. It has primarily been a kinetic conflict between Russia and Ukraine. They're dropping bombs and firing bullets more than they are waging targeted cyber attacks. That being said, we have seen some cyber attacks. We've seen a number of website defacements, distributed denial of service attacks to knock off key IT assets in both Russia and Ukraine and some surrounding countries. We've even seen some different wiper malware attacks that are designed to brick IT devices permanently. We've seen two types of malware here. One is known as the Whispergate malware, and the other is known as hermetic wiper. And the hermetic wiper malware comes with another component observed by a group called ESET called Hermetic Wizard. This type of malware shares the self-propagating capability that the infamous NotPetya virus had. This all means that there is the possibility for some sort of widespread wiper malware attack that jumps borders and ensnares hundreds or thousands of companies globally in a lot of cyber losses. Now, that being said, this is a remote possibility, but we have seen the evidence on the ground that the Russian threat actors have the capability and the intent to use this type of malware. Now, that's really a lot of what we've seen to date, alongside the inclusion of globally distributed cyber armies and their activities. The Anonymous Collective has pledged allegiance to Ukraine. The infamous Conti ransomware gang has pledged allegiance to Russia. Now they're suffering some data leaks at the moment. Clearly, these different non-state sponsored threat actors are fighting amongst each other as well. In summary, that it's truly a global cyber war at the moment. I know insurers are very sensitive about that term, rightfully so, but we are seeing a level of activity that is truly unprecedented.
Thank you for that summary of activity, and obviously there is a lot going on there, but can we talk about what we're predicting could happen, or what could happen in a worst case scenario going forward?
Absolutely. Now, there's several levels of escalation that are needed before we get to that worst case scenario. But what we think will really happen next is that the different countries around the world that have pledged support for Ukraine, either politically, diplomatically, or even militarily, will be in the crosshairs of the Russian state-sponsored threat actors, those different advanced persistent groups that are managed by the SVR, the FSB, and namely the GRU. These groups are going to go after those targets for their support of Ukraine. And we think these could be highly symbolic targets, namely to make a statement at first. This will be the first level of escalation, probably just to show the United States government and European governments, and even as far away as the Japanese government, hey, we're in your systems and we can take action if we want to. That's enough right now to dissuade us from waging cyber attacks on the Russians. Now, another level of escalation could see sanctions and diplomacy get exhausted. Russia's continuing the war effort in Ukraine. The United States decides to take a preemptive strike and strikes out at Russia. In that case, Russia would absolutely launch a strike back. It would largely be known to be state-sponsored, but probably technically not attributable to those threat actors, as we've seen in the past. Likely targets would be things like industries like banking, the financial system, maybe an attack on SWIFT. We could probably see some attacks on maybe like lower level utilities, wastewater management facilities. But the point is that the services they would disrupt would largely be a widespread nuisance and symbolic, but not necessarily critical and immediately declared an act of war. You have to keep in mind that the Russian government does not want an all-out war with the United States today. They know they would lose that war, so they have to tread right up into the point where they're dissuading us from getting further involved without declaring war. And the types of targets they pick are going to fall within that targeting matrix. When it comes to those industries that we think are really likely to get hit, we really think it's banking, financial services, IT assets and infrastructure, managed service providers, namely internet service providers, potentially shipping and logistics companies, and down into your public utilities, healthcare, and so on. Government targets, those are going to come later in a higher level of escalation.
It's very interesting how you're pointing out certain industries that we think are likely to be targeted in any cyber attack. Can you tell me a little bit about the analytical process from our side? How do we select those industries? How do we put together that list?
Well, CyberCube is looking at the threat actors and their motivation and their intent, and also their known tactics, techniques, and procedures for compromising their targets, including the types of technologies that they typically go after, the vulnerabilities that they typically exploit, essentially mapping out kill chains for the most likely threat actors. And then we're applying that to different industries, trying to see which industries are most susceptible to those different tactics, techniques, and procedures, namely which industries deploy the technologies that these threat actors like to go after. That's one way that we're looking at industries and putting them in terms of a hierarchy in terms of their level of susceptibility. We're also just looking generally at the threat actors' motivation around the retaliation that they want to stage. So we know that they've been kicked off SWIFT. Attacking SWIFT would be highly symbolic and make a big statement that they're not to be messed with, these types of attacks. So it's a combination of that data-centric approach and really an expert-driven threat intelligence approach to selecting those industries.
Now, for people watching this video, where can they find out more information about our opinions and our views as the situation continues to develop?
Absolutely. Well, CyberCube is always publishing information on our blog. We're trying to make it known to the world that we're following this event for brokers, insurers, and reinsurers, and really focused on those questions that matter most to this industry when it comes to this cyber activity. We also have our CyberCube concierge service. This service is going to provide access to all the cyber expertise at CyberCube. All of our ex-Intel analysts, our ex-cyber defense professionals, our threat intelligence pros, and our insurance people, all in one streamlined operational way for you and your team. So you can get access to our security incident reports following these major events, the who, what, where, when, why, and even some footprint modeling and potential scope of impact modeling as well. And it's really just a great service to equip your team to understand what's going on in real time while these events happen.
William, thank you very much for all that information. A lot going on, and we should be keeping up to date with everything. You'll find the blogs on our website. You'll find this report as well on your website. And that address is www.cybercube.com. For CyberCube, I'm Yvette Essen.